Welcome, everyone. Jeff Jensen, Director of Community Programs here with Trees Forever. And boy, I'd like to welcome you to the kickoff to our Stewards of the Beautiful Land 2024 with this first webinar, and it's a good one. We have Bri Hull, our Northeast Iowa Field Coordinator, with us here today, and she's going to be diving into spring ephemerals. Everyone, this is our inaugural webinar for 2024 for our Stewards of the Beautiful Land series. And we have got a great lineup of webinars as well as field days lined up here. So speaking of webinars, save the date here. These are the next ones that we have coming up. May 15th, of course, today is Spring Ephemerals. On the 29th, we're going to be talking about trees and pollinators. And then on June 12th, it's going to be Forest Therapy 101. And then Native Seed Cleaning. You're going to get your full dose of Trees Forever field coordinators because later in May here, Trees for Pollinators, a little teaser. This is going to be great because one of our field coordinators actually took a trek to Mexico where a lot of the monarch butterflies overwinter in the trees. And so she is going to share her experiences, talk all about that mass migration. It is going to be phenomenal. So that's going to be later in May here. And then Karen is going to talk to us about forest therapy. And that'll be a really fun session. And then our very own Bri Hull is going to come back for native seed cleaning later in June. And that's going to be a really fun episode as well. How do we get this high quality native seed that we want to plant? How does that all come to be? How do we harvest it? How do we clean it? How do we get it to a state where we can use it? So get those webinars on your calendar. Go ahead and get registered on our Trees Forever website. As far as our agenda for today, I want to just spend a few minutes here on some upcoming field days, because that's another important component of our Stewards of the Beautiful Land programming. While we do have the twice per month webinars, we also have that opportunity for you to come out and touch and feel and experience nature and our native roadsides excuse me, with our field days. And so we have field days in Harrison, Story, Black Hawk, and Des Moines counties this year. And actually later this month in Black Hawk, things are going to kick off there, where Black Hawk County is going to have a plant sale and a prairie or plant identification workshop, I should say, at the Hartman Nature Preserve. So if you're interested in that, find that interesting, go to our Trees Forever website, the events page, and be sure to check that out and get the details. And then here we go, June 5th, we have over in Harrison County at the Willow Lake Nature Center, this traveling prairie display. They also have one of those really neat prairie root displays from the UNI Tallgrass Prairie Center. And so that's going to be an opportunity to see that traveling prairie display and then go take a walk out in the prairie. Early season, June, we'll see what's blooming there. On that same day in June, over in Des Moines County, Stars Cave State Park, Stars Cave Park, there's going to be an invasive species removal and a native plant ID session. Again, hone your skills on some of those native plants and then lend a helping hand to do some of that invasive species removal. And then later on in June, this is going to be a really fun time with Dr. Tom Rosberg at the Doolittle Prairie. It's a prairie remnant in Story County. And so we'll be doing a walk there. Not to be outdone, on June 6th, there's actually going to be a native plants and landscaping presentation back at the Hartman Nature Preserve with Amy Davison. So if you've ever had interest in utilizing some of these wonderful native plants, the grasses, the forbs, the colors, in your home landscaping, Amy is going to be the one to talk all about that. And then I just have to mention this because it's a ways out, but it's over the 4th of July weekend. And so if you've had enough of your family over July 4th and 5th and you're looking to get away, hey, come on down to the campus of UNI to the Darrell Smith Prairie, because our very own Bri Hull is going to have a prairie walk and a little history lesson at that site Saturday, July 6th. Be there or be square. Details at our Trees Forever events calendar. Okay, I kind of feel like the Micro Machine, zipping through all of those great upcoming field days. Before we get to our featured presentation, we just had Mother's Day. And so especially if you didn't participate in this last year, because I just recycled this from last year, what's the best flower for a boy to give his mom for Mother's Day? Drum roll, please. Survey says sunflowers, of course. All right, so with that, spring ephemerals with Bri Hull.
Fantastic. All right. Hi, everyone. So as Jeff said, my name is Bri Hull. I am the Northeast Iowa Field Coordinator with Trees Forever. And this year I have been blessed with the opportunity to present to you spring ephemerals. So just to introduce myself a little bit, so like I said, I'm the new Northeast Iowa Field Coordinator, started back in November. I have a BA in biology with minors in environmental science and leadership from Wartburg, and I was a 2-year Green Iowa AmeriCorps member at the Tallgrass Prairie Center, and I'm just doing my best. So yeah, this photo on the right, I don't have a lot of photos of myself, but this is one of my favorites. Just to plug that prairie roots display, this is one of those roots. So that is a live plant that just got pulled out of the ground, and I love that you can see the turfus, the material that they use instead of soil, just falling right out of it. So if you want to see something like that in person, I highly recommend that. So a little bit about Trees Forever. Our mission is to plant and care for trees and the environment by empowering people, building community, and promoting stewardship. This is a photo from a recent planting. It was an Alliant Energy grant planting, and this community, I believe it is Dyersville, that applied for this grant, and all the kids came out and helped us get these trees in the ground. And this is another Black Hills Energy planting out in, I believe, Green, but Trees Forever has planted more than 3.4 million trees since 1989. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we have a staff of over 20 spread across Iowa and into Illinois. So let's get into it. Spring is here. I can't say it's coming because we're already in it. So Trees Forever in Iowa, we do a couple of different things. This is another Black Hills Energy planting. These are some of our Black Hills Energy staff that came to a school out in Decorah. We planted a couple of new trees out there for their newly built preschool. So as the field coordinator in Iowa, I help small communities participate in community visioning with ISU, receive grants through Alliant and Black Hills Energy to get those trees in the ground. I help organize volunteers for tree care and planting, plan for future plantings, and we also offer workshops and presentations for city staffs and community groups, but it does not end there. So be sure to check out our website if you are interested in what we do. All right, let's get to it. We're going to go through a virtual walk in the woods. So like Jeff said, I borrowed and recycled a little bit of this from last year's presentation. Emily Ely, one of our Illinois field coordinator staff, and I just really liked how she did it. So let's go on a little walk together. But first, let's get nerdy. So my background is mostly prairie, but when I graduated from Wartburg, my senior research was on spring ephemerals. So my research, I looked at the Web Soil Survey, which is an awesome free resource provided by the USDA. I highly recommend checking out this website. They have so much great map information about the soil that you have. Slope, zone, soil type, composition, everything. So I used that digital data and cross-referenced it with iDigBio, which is a huge, huge database of citizen science. So the way that I used it, I looked up the scientific name. I was looking at 4 different species, one of which was Hydrophyllum virginianum. And then I cross-referenced the sighting locations that are logged in iDigBio with the maps available on Web Soil Survey. So I got to learn a lot about our ephemeral species, and you can too, because both of these websites are free and available to the public. You just gotta dig around in there. So I said I was looking at 4 different species. So let's talk a little bit about those species. So my professor, she is known as the Virginia waterleaf professor. Every research project that she was a supervisor for, we did something with Hydrophyllum virginianum, which is pictured on the left here. It's this gorgeous spring ephemeral plant. It has these beautiful clusters of flowers, these gorgeous green leaves. They're very low to the ground, and the flowers, pollinators love it. They call it candy for them. It's just got this amazing sweet smell. Now on the right here, you can see broadleaf waterleaf, which is Hydrophyllum. I'm blanking on its name now. Oh no. But so it's a very similar species in the same genus. It has similar flowers, so it's kind of difficult to identify them based on that, but that's where we look at the leaves. So a lot of this that I'm going to show you is how you can better identify plants. Another thing that I'd like to point out here, a lot of the photos that I'm using in this are from a website/app called iNaturalist, and I'll get a little bit more into that later. But yeah, so those are our first two species. I directly compared these two and what soils they grew in. And similarly, I looked at Dutchman's breeches and squirrel corn. Both are dicentra species. One is more common, one is more rare. I love these little guys. They call these Dutchman's breeches because they look like little pants, little pantaloons. And then on the right, you see squirrel corn. They look like little corn nuts. And going back to that iNaturalist, iNaturalist is a citizen science website. So both of these photos came from them. The funny thing is the photo on the right on iNaturalist was actually misidentified as Dutchman's breeches, but you can see their difference there. The flower or their leaves you can see are very similar. So in this case, you would more look at the flowers to figure out what they are. But those are other really cool little spring ephemerals you can find. So we've been saying this word a lot. What is an ephemeral, you might be asking? So as I said, my professor, she really pushed when we were learning vocabulary, there's going to be a lot of vocabulary in this, to try to learn your words by identifying them in 5 words or less. So for each definition, I will have a 5-word or less version and then a longer one. So first, spring flowers, short life. That might not give a lot of information, but it might be, easier to remember. So the word ephemeral means transitory or quickly fading. Spring ephemerals are species that have a small window of sunshine between snowmelt and leaf out, which to grow flower, be pollinated, and produce seeds. By mid-June, the deciduous trees that tower above have cloaked the forest floor in deep shade. Spring ephemerals disappear in the heat of the summer, retreating underground until next year. And they are found throughout eastern United States and Canada. Spring ephemerals also thrive on the floor of rich, undisturbed woodlands. You'll also find that a lot of these species really enjoy wet soils, so floodplains, areas like that, where you will find more of those deciduous forests. But why would these plants do that? Why would they want to live for such a short period? Well, it's their strategy. I mean, you have to come up with something to survive out there. So they are common in deciduous forests. This allows these plants to take advantage of the open sunshine and, that clear path before the forest floor and the trees fully leaf out. So these are those green guys you see pop up real early in the season. So getting into iNaturalist, something important when you're walking through, especially when you're trying to learn, is you want to know what you're looking at. So do you feel like you need help with ID? iNaturalist has got you, and you might already have this, but I really enjoy using it, and it is a powerful tool, especially for beginners. So it is a free phone app and website. So this is directly from the website. This is from the previous Northeast Iowa Field Coordinator, Andrew Rust's profile. So you do create one, and you can see he has made 133 observations. So what you do is you snap a photo, you post it. If you think you know what it is, you can offer up an identification, or you can say, I don't know what this is, and everybody will pop on and tell you what they think it is. And then you can also compare it to previous sightings to see maybe if you can identify it that way. It will also automatically map where you took the photo. And as you can see here, there's that trail of others that were confirming Andrew's identification. So, and then they also label these as either regular or they can be research grade. This is such a clear photo and has so much support on the identification. It is considered a research grade identification. You can also create localized projects with this. So you can define a geographical area, and people don't even need to know about your project, but if they use the app, snap the photo, and put it in observation that happens to be in that area, it will automatically be included within that project. So this is one that I know about in Darrell Smith. They're looking at logging all of the actually identified and visible species that are growing rather than just looking at what they know has been planted there. So this is a way that they can gather that data over the season without needing to have a ton of people out there doing an actual survey. All right, so we've got another one of those big words, phenology. So our 5-word definition, the study of nature's calendar. Think circadian rhythms. So study of periodic events in biological cycles and how they are influenced by seasonal and interannual variations. So something similar to that, while these plants, they are triggered to germinate by light, they are also signaled to germinate by temperature, by depth, moisture. So it's not just one signal telling these plants where they need to go. So they have kind of adapted and gotten that strategy by the area around them. You can learn more about phenology from the USA National Phenology Network or at usanpn.org. It's a great resource, tons of information. And another awesome resource that I would highly recommend looking into is this Prairie Seedling and Seeding Identification Guide. This is one version of how you can identify plants when they're small. We know that when you first go out there and everything's popping up and everything's like maybe less than an inch tall, they all kind of look the same. They've got those little cotyledons. They don't look very different. So I would say getting one of these and something for spring ephemerals so you can tell what those little guys are. So this is a free resource guide made available by the Iowa DOT and the LRTF. You can get physical copies at a variety of locations, and you can get a digital copy now online. So I have the link here, but if you just search, Prairie Seedling Guide, Iowa DOT, LRTF, you'll find it, and you'll find the other guides. But it does have those little photos of the seeds, and it has the photos of the small plant and the mature plant. So the importance of that, of course, is, do you all know what plant this is if you're just looking at it? These little basal rosettes that are just peeking through. Just a little hint, it is a spring ephemeral. But I mean, now it looks really different just a few weeks later. Can you tell what that is? And now you can tell what it is. So it's really important to understand what these species look like at all life stages. So we go all the way back to those basal rosettes. They pop up, you start to get a flowering shoot. You can definitely see those leaves have grown out, and then you get your flowers. Now this is Eastern Shooting Star, and it is another spring ephemeral plant, like I said. It is also a prairie plant, and we'll get into it a little bit more later. Another super common plant that you will find are Virginia bluebells. These are one of my absolute favorites. They are absolutely gorgeous. Martensia virginica. They are found in wet woodland areas along floodplains and streams, but are also common in backyards. They grow in large patches and really cover the landscape. I absolutely love how they look. They look like, they remind me of lace, just the way that they lay so delicately across. And I mean, this photo, it just floors me. And these are all photos from iNaturalist as well. So other people out there taking photos just like you. So their soft, ovular, smooth-edged leaves grow up to 7 inches and will flop over as they mature. When they first begin to peek through the ground, their foliage is purple. So we're going back to that. They look very different when they're young. But as they get bigger, that fades to green. They reach up to just 2.5 feet tall with about a foot wide per plant, and they bloom from late March to late May. So we're starting to see these guys go away already. So like most ephemerals, they're an important food source for pollinators, but especially bees. So if we look at these long tubular structures, we know that the stamens, we can see them poking out right here in the flowers, but that's where they would get their pollen, but where are the bees going to get their nectar? So it would be mostly something with a large tongue or proboscis that would reach all the way in. So you get bees, you get butterflies, but you get those other guys, I call them little thieves. They might rob these plants of their nectar by nibbling a little hole in the base here to get straight to it. But the reason they're robbing it is because they're not going down here and getting the pollen and helping the plant, they're just helping themselves. Next, another favorite of mine. These are one of the very first to pop up. They are so cute. They're called bloodroot. So looking at their beautiful white flowers, you might be wondering how they got such an interesting name. But as you can see here, when you cut the stem, they exude this beautiful pink red, like a sap. It looks kind of like blood. So they also, but much like bluebells, bloodroot grows in clumps. They also have highly variable leaves that previously led to a variety of named subspecies, but more recently they have just been, put under this one name, Saguinaria canadensis. So they have these very beautiful, large, deeply lobed leaves that reach up to 9 inches across. They're also a bit fuzzy. It's also a rhizomatous species. I love rhizomatous species when they're native. So they have this very nice branching underground network that form large colonies, and you can see all of that red sap underground as well. They are easy to identify when in bloom by their brilliant white 2-inch flowers. Each stalk only produces 1 flower. You can see that down here. So they also have those bright yellow stamens in the middle of those flowers with a central green pistil. You can kind of see it in that left photo. And they often have 8 total symmetrically arranged petals with 4 large and 4 small. I did see some photos on the University of Wisconsin horticultural website where they had just a huge cluster of petals. So I would definitely check that out. It's pretty cool, but most commonly you will see them appear in this way. So these guys are beautiful. Oh my gosh, they are easily pollinated by a variety of bees and flies. Once pollinated, the flowers just close 2 days later, and their elongate seed pods form with rows of 10 to 15 seeds per pod. What I hadn't mentioned before was that these plants are not only ephemerals, but they're also eliosomes. So you might be wondering what an eliosome is. So these are fatty appendages that are used to disperse the seeds. So ants, which is another word we're going to get into a little bit later, they will be attracted to that little appendage and plant the intact seeds outside of their nest. So we're going to get a little photo of that. You can see the seed is on the right here, this nice bulbous thing here, and then you see the eliosome appendage. Now, if you're an ant, you're looking at this little thing and you're like, I just want the little fatty food right there. So they drag it out. It has a nice little handle, and then they say, all right, let me just rip that off and leave the seed. The bloodroot loves this. But this has another word. It's called Myrmecochory. So what do you think that is? Seed dispersal by ants. There's our 5 or less ants or definition there. So about 30 to 40% of forest wildflowers in our deciduous forests are myrmecores, or ant dispersed plants. So these guys are awesome, right? It's kind of cool to see how different plants are dispersing their seeds. And now I've got a podcast recommendation for you. So last year, Emily had recommended the In Defense of Plants podcast, and I will recommend it again. They are on Spotify, Apple Music, but they also have a website that includes a blog with a ton of information. So I am highlighting 2 episodes here. So episode 166 is the first Myrmecochory episode that they did, and then they actually followed it up more recently on episode 419 with the same guest, Dr. Robert Warren. So Dr. Matt Candius, I always mispronounce his name, is the host of all of the episodes, and he does have a degree in ecology, and he loves just sharing interesting information about these plants. So I would definitely check them out for these 2 episodes, but just in general. All right, so let's move on our little journey here. We have got shooting star dodecatheon media. So these guys, we talked a little bit about them earlier. It's a bit of a tricky one, and so I want to showcase the different ways you might see it in context of its habitat, because we did take a close look at its life cycle earlier. So both of these photos are from iNaturalist. On the left is a fantastic photo highlighting its key features, and on the right is a fantastic photo of what you might see when you are out and about. You can see like how a professional photo might look really different from when you're actually just, chilling out there. But can you see what might be off about the photo on the left? I want you to pay close attention to that while I keep going. So the scientific name of this plant, it's interesting. It's a little bit confusing. There are a lot of species in the dodecatheon genus, but we're focusing on the eastern shooting star, also sometimes called Primula media. So if you're identifying it and using iNaturalist, it might pop up under 2 names. In its early spring, it forms all of those basal rosettes that we looked at earlier from a fibrous root system. Once it's more mature, it gains the trademarked smooth, lance-shaped leaves that grow up to 6 inches long and 2.5 inches wide. It has a prominent central vein and smooth margins. Now, after I've said that, can you see what might be off about the ID on the left? So the guy on the left was misidentified in iNaturalist, so we just got to pay attention to those. This is a photo of what Eastern shooting star actually looks like. It's those leaves. So these guys have those toothed leaves. It still has that central vein, but it's those margins, and they're supposed to be basilar. So you can see a better one here. So in mid-spring, one or more thin flower scapes growing up to 18 inches shoot from the rosettes. So you can see that central one there in both of the species. And each umbel will, or the group of clustered flowers, will have 8 to 20 blooming flowers in late spring. So we're already seeing these guys pop up, and they're already going to start kind of fading away soon. Shooting star is identified by its distinctive 5 upward reflexed petals that cluster with a cluster of yellow stamens around a purplish green style that come together in a downward point. They're called shooting stars. They really make me think of fireworks when they're coming down. And the northern population of this flower, interesting enough, have been found to have more lavender or purple flowers. I'm thinking more Minnesota, Canada. And then the southern populations are more likely to have light pink to white flowers. So this flower actually does not produce nectar, but pollinators will visit them just to collect the pollen. And once they are pollinated, they form an erect oval mahogany-colored capsule where the fine seeds will then be wind dispersed. Woodland phlox, I'm seeing this everywhere as well. Absolutely beautiful, and they do a similar thing to the bluebells. They just cover the ground with that beautiful blue lacy color. So these guys also enjoy the floodplains and partially shaded meadows. They're very widely dispersed. They are very, very common. So they go all the way from southern Canada down to Florida to Texas and the Rockies. It has a shallow root system and slowly spreads over time. It kind of creeps about. The stems are hairy and have opposite sessile, so they are separate leaves, hairy, lance-shaped elliptic leaves, and they grow up to 2 inches long with smooth margins in widely spaced pairs. So you can kind of see that displayed on the left here. So these flowers require cross-pollination to produce their seed and are only pollinated by long-tongued insects like butterflies, skippers, some moths, and bumblebees. Like with bluebells, they are also susceptible to those thieves. You can see it on this top flower here. They might nibble into that little thing there and they won't pollinate. Another one that you might see creeping across the forest floor, wild ginger, Asarum canadense. Wild ginger is a low colony forming perennial, and it only grows 4 to 8 inches high. Each plant has a pair of large velvety heart-shaped leaves, which you can see on the right here. I think they're just so cute with the little fuzz. And they grow at ground level with a crotch between 2 leaf stalks and a single darkish red-brown to green-brown flower. And the solitary flower that it grows is actually below the leaves. These guys are found in moist to slightly dry woodlands, both floodplain and upland and bluffs. They're also found along ravines and slopes. I just love how they kind of just cascade down these slopes. And the flowers attract flies or beetles as their pollinating agents. The seeds attract the ants because of their fleshy appendages. They have those little eliosomes as well, but the toxic foliage is not eaten by deer or any mammal. So these guys are called wild ginger because of its aromatic rhizomes that have a ginger-like fragrance and flavor. Fresh or dried, they can also be used as a substitute for the spice. Just have to be careful when preparing it. All right, we've been talking a lot about these low vascular plants, but trees are also plants. So why are we leaving them out of the conversation? Let's talk about Hysteranthous. This is one of those other words. So our little 5-word or less definition, leaves emerge after flowers open. So, I mean, the definition really needs to just hang out there. The leaves will emerge after the flowers come out. So on these trees, you won't see a lot of green foliage in the early spring, but you will see their beautiful blooms. And then later they will start to leaf out. So here are some examples of species that are a part of that family. So we get witch hazel, American hazelnut, red maple, redbud, serviceberry, flowering dogwood. So witch hazel flowers very, very early. We've already seen it. It's come and gone. Same thing with the American hazelnut. Jeff knows all about that. And then we already have had red maple come and go. So right now what we're going to be seeing mostly are those red buds, serviceberries, and dogwoods. But we have some awesome photos of these guys. There's that witch hazel. This is from Emily. She took this amazing photo. You can see these gorgeous flowers here, but no leaves. You can also see the trademark Illinois gray sky for that early winter or early spring, late winter. You get the American hazelnut with these beautiful flowers, but again, no leaves. And then of course a red maple. This photo is from Chris Evans at the University of Illinois, but like I said, really beautiful flowers that have already come and gone. All right, we got another vocabulary word, cauliflower. Not cauliflower. I promise it's not cauliflower. So these guys fruit and flower from the trunk. So what do we mean by that? Just like flowering dogwood, they will fruit and flower directly from main branches and trunks rather from smaller branches or leaflets. So you've got species like flowering dogwood here, absolutely beautiful, but you can see the leaves and flowers, you know, doing that cauliflower thing. Now the word cauliflower, it is a term derived from the Latin caulis, meaning stem, and flor, meaning flower. So the vegetable cauliflower, Brassica oleracea, has the same name. It is not cauliflorous. The dense cluster of unopened flower buds that we eat arise from the main flower stalk. So as opposed to most woody flowering plants, which produce inflorescences on new growth or young leafy shoots, we have these guys. All right, I love this photo because it looks like you're stalking the tree and wondering like, okay, how do we feel about this guy? Does anyone want to put into the questions box what they think that tree is and if they think it is a friend or a foe? So this guy is our not so friendly foe, the Callery or Bradford pear. These guys are popping up all over the place, and from afar they look beautiful, but I'm sorry, when I look out there and I see just all these big white trees that have that typical shape, I always, in my head, I call it a pear shape because it just makes sense. This invasive species, it gets to me. So we do have non-natives and invasives that are also ephemerals. So we just got to keep an eye out for that. Oh my goodness, am I losing it here? Here we go. All right, now where do you guys like to go to see them? So before I go into my favorite places, you guys can start typing away. Where are your favorite places to walk in the woods? Where do you like to go? Doesn't have to be anywhere fancy like I have on here. I also like to just walk around the neighborhood, but I also live across the street from George Wythe. But yeah, just let us all know. Maybe we can start sharing a little network. But like I said, I like going to George Wythe State Park. They have these amazing trails, amazing trees that overlook, and that's also where I go to see the bluebells. They, like I said, they just look like little lace, and it has that lake, so we get a lot of these ephemeral species, bloodroot and the like. I also enjoy going to Backbone State Park. They also have a lot of water that flows through in streams, and with that tree canopy, you get tons of these guys. And then Union Grove State Park, which is out in Gladbrook.
Bri, just to be clear, this is where we can see spring ephemerals and not that invasive Callery pear.
Agreed, not the invasive. These are where we go to see it, the nice stuff, the nice spring ephemerals, which, like I said, we're almost getting into summer, so get out there and see them before they're all gone. I've been seeing tons of shooting star too. They'll come up on the edges, and the phlox has just been going nuts lately. I've been seeing it on roadsides too. All right, so we're gonna get into some pop quizzes. So if you have not been putting your answers in the question box, I would love for you to start doing it now. So our first question, what creature did Myrmecochory involve? Awesome, you guys got it. Ants, got our little ant buddies. They are involved in grabbing those eliosomes that are attached to our seeds. They pop off the fatty part that they want to eat and leave our seeds to germinate. Awesome. If a species is Hysteranthous, what emerges first? Seeing flowers. That's right. So if a species is Hysteranthous, its flowers come out before it leaves out. We have things like the red maple that do that. All right, let's get back to it. So a spring ephemeral, and it's a bonus if you can define it in 5 words or less. Awesome. Joe, you are killing it out here. First spring flowers, short bloom. So yeah, those spring ephemerals, they pop up really, really early. They're some of the first we see, like that bloodroot, the bluebells, the phlox, and then they come up from their basal flowers, or sorry, their basal leaves, not always, but they come up nice and early. They shoot off their flowering stalks, provide pollen and nectar for those pollinators that come out nice and early. Once they're pollinated, they senesce, which is one of my favorite words, or die back, and then they come back next year. All right, guys, this was on the title slide. We've been talking about this guy quite a bit. Do you all remember what this species is? Fantastic. Yes, it is a bloodroot. These guys are one of my favorites. They're just so beautiful and delicate. So if you see them out there, be very careful with them. But they do have that little bloody like sap in the stem. They are rhizomatous, so they have that network underground that they use to spread in colonies. And they have those very nice, large, deeply lobed leaves. All right, everyone, I know this was a quick one. Thank you all. This is my information. If you have any questions that pop up in your head, feel free to reach out to me. These are also our social media handles, so if you want to keep up with what we're doing, feel free to follow us. And I believe Jeff will have some spot for questions now.
Thank you, Bri. That was phenomenal. I love the quiz too, because it's always good to put our knowledge into use and practice. So, well, let's jump into any questions that folks might have. Well, first of all, a few other places that were reported for places to see spring ephemerals. Gina mentioned Turkey Creek Nature Preserve, and Kate mentioned Geode State Park in Des Moines County. So thank you for sharing those. If others have some, please let us know. Now, Heather wants to know, curious to learn more about the invasive pear tree, and
Yes.
where could she find more information?
Oh gosh, pear trees, you could just look that up and you will find everything under the sun. Trees Forever, I believe, has some resources as well, but these guys have a pretty interesting history. They were one of the first approved trees for landscaping in urban areas, and they became very popular because they flower so early as a spring ephemeral, and they're beautiful, but they also claim that they were sterile. They are from, I believe, China. I know they're definitely an Asian species, and they are definitely not sterile. They spread like crazy. And when they're small, they're little stick version of themselves, little saplings. They have a bright red trunk with these little like notches. They just pop up so easy. And then the smell, everybody says it smells like something different, but when you have a whole streetscape of it, it kind of smells like rotting fish to me. So you probably see it a lot. I see it a lot in like, I go to Peoria, a lot of times they're downtown, the whole side of the sidewalks we covered in them. So yeah, states like Missouri, they do buyback programs where if you have a calorie pear tree, I'm sorry, my dog is coughing. If you have a calorie pear tree in your yard and you decide to remove it, you can actually trade it in for a native tree. I don't know of those. I know some communities are trying to get that off the ground in Iowa. I don't know about Illinois, but yeah. Jeff, I don't know if you have any other resources for calorie pears.
No, not directly. Just a reminder, though, we will go ahead and send a link for the recording on YouTube, and we'll also include some of the links that Bri mentioned in her presentation. We'll get those in there so that you can take a look at them. The National Phenology Network one, the iNaturalist. So we'll have all that for you here in a day or two. So stay tuned for that. Other questions that we have. Let's see here. Well, you're certainly a great instructor, Bri, that's for sure. Deanne wants to know, how would I go about planting spring ephemerals in my woods? So are these things that someone could go out and purchase, or how could they get some of these different spring ephemerals if they wanted to have them?
I know seeds are available. There are some native nurseries that might even have some. When I was looking online, and while I typically do not recommend going out to a preserve and digging them up, do not do that. They do transplant really easily. So if you do see like starters in a greenhouse, you don't really have to worry too much as long as you get them into a good shaded spot, you plant them at the right time. So if you look online, there are definitely seeds that are available. And I don't know about you, but I've been seeing all the like little ant mounds exploding in the ground. And after reading this, I imagine them like carrying off the little seeds. So you probably won't have any issues with the ants doing their job if you want to get some of these guys out there.
Fantastic. Great advice. Here's one. I see a lot of woodlands without spring ephemerals. Are spring ephemerals a sign of any indication or of a healthy woodland ecosystem or anything like that?
I would have to look a little more into it. I am inclined to say that they can be an indication. They grow in those huge mats, and so they grow in like really nice colonies. And maybe if you're not seeing it, we've been having quite a bit of droughts in Iowa recently. These guys really, really like moist soil. So if we don't get the flooding like we usually do or the snow melt, these guys may not get those, triggers that they usually will get. So like I said, there's a ton of things that trigger a seed to germinate. You get the sunlight, you get the temperature, and you get that moisture. So if they're not getting one of those things, they're gone.
Well, Bri, that might be a great segue into the next question here, which is how do I encourage my spring ephemerals? My bloodroot really didn't come out this year. Last year it was all over. So could it be that variation in any of those three, or is there something else going on?
I would have to say it could likely be one of those variations. It also just very much depends on your area. If you had them all over the place, maybe they have like a little bit of a dormancy period. Some species will do that. Like hydrophyllum is interesting. It doesn't flower the first year. The first year it will come up, you'll just see the leaves, nothing. And then it'll senesce. Sometimes they'll even come back in the fall and flower instead of in the spring. So they might have an interesting life cycle too.
Fascinating.
They're fun little guys.
Oh, here's a great comment from Joe Dillon. And this is in reference to earlier about planting spring ephemerals in my woods. Joe says that Prairie Moon Nursery and others can sell both seeds and plants. So check that out, Prairie Moon Nursery. And they were one of the vendors for the UNI Seed Day. So saw those folks here last week. That was great. Okay. Well, any other questions anyone has, please feel free to put them in the questions tab. In the meantime, I'm going to make another plug for our field days coming up here, and want to mention to get on your calendars and get registered for some of the upcoming webinars that we have. Going to be a really fun one here next 2 weeks, I should say, with pollinators and trees, all about the monarch life cycle and where they go in Mexico to hang out. And so that's going to be with some of our field coordinators here at Trees Forever. Oh, Prairie Moon, Kate jumps in and says, hey, had really good luck with there. So Prairie Moon, we've got 2 thumbs up, Siskel and Ebert here. So definitely check them out if you're interested in getting some of those spring ephemerals. Well, Bri, any last thoughts that you have for our group here?
Thank you for bearing with me on my very first presentation, and I look forward to seeing you all at the next ones, and I really hope to see you in person at some of our field days.
You did a great job, Bri. Absolutely, really appreciate the learning aspect. 5 words or less, and I learned all sorts of stuff from Hysteranthous to Myrmecochory, top notch. With that, everyone have a great day. We'll catch you in 2 weeks, and we'll hope to see you at one of our field days in June. Have a great day, everyone.